Welcome to Hamilton Fraser. I'm Sammy and these are our series of help videos. Today we're going to be talking about different types of insurance, and we have got Eddie Hooker, the CEO, and Emma Brackey, the claims specialist. So Eddie, what type of insurance do I need if I'm a practitioner?
Well, there's a good question. So there's a plethora of insurances that you should think about. The important thing to say on insurance that your insurance requirements will change as you develop your practice, and also depending on your appetite to risk. So how much risk do you want to take by not insuring something? But let's start with the real basic one, which is the medical indemnity insurance, or for another terminology, medical malpractice. And in an elective aesthetic practice, that is probably the most important insurance you should be taking out. So what does medical malpractice cover you for? So it will cover you for your legal liability to your patient if you cause them any bodily injury, mental anguish, financial loss following a treatment that you have provided to them. Now, most medical practitioners will have some form of medical indemnity insurance, whether that's through their NHS work or through their defence bodies. But most people come to Hamilton Fraser for medical indemnity to cover their specific aesthetic practice treatments. And that's what we offer under our policy. So it's dedicated to your aesthetic practice rather than your general practice work. A good question always asked to me is, do I need to cancel any defence body organisation cover that I've got and put it all with Hamilton Fraser? Our general answer is, whilst we can do the whole thing for you, my recommendation would be to split out your general practice work from your medical indemnity, leave that with your defence body, and then insure separately your commercial work in your aesthetic practice. There's lots of different types of medical malpractice out there. We recommend that you look very, very carefully at the limit of indemnity you're buying. Generally, it should be £5 million in the aggregate or any one claim. You need to make sure that you understand that you have to keep these policies going. Yeah, so you can't, once you cancel them, you need to make sure that you've replaced immediately with another insurance policy that will pick up what's called the run-off cover, because these policies are written on what's called a claims made basis, so you have to have a policy in force at the time of the treatment and at the time of the claim. But give us a call on that because they can get quite complicated.
So if you have two different insurance policies and you're with someone for the when the treatment happens, and you're with a different insurance provider when the claim happens, what would happen then? So
in that case, you probably would fall down the cracks in the floorboards on that. So what we recommend is that if you're leaving Hamilton Fraser and going to another insurance policy, make sure that that new insurance policy covers you for any past work that you have done whilst you were insured with us. Our policy will automatically give you that cover, so we will make sure that all of your past work is covered. And when you stop practicing, you need to keep that policy going for a good few years, okay, to make sure that if any claims come out of the woodwork, that they're picked up. That you would agree with that, Emma?
100%.
Yeah.
And so medical malpractice, so does that cover the practitioner themselves? So what if they are a practitioner and they also are then opening their own practice? Does that cover that?
Yeah, so medical malpractice can cover the individual or it can cover the clinic. And the clinic in policy will then list out all the practitioners that work for that clinic.
Are they separate insurance policies?
Same policy, but just written in a slightly different way. But I always recommend people give us a call, chat through their circumstances, ask all the questions, and make sure that they're buying the product which is right for them and not just picking up any form of medical malpractice off the internet or just because they've bumped into an insurance company that will do it. Make sure you're going to a specialist like ourselves because we understand the market and we understand the cover that we're actually giving.
Okay, so you can protect the practitioners,
Yeah.
you can protect the clinic,
Yes.
but what about, people have been talking a lot about GDPR, so how can you protect your computer systems?
Right, so data is a big thing at the moment, and we've all heard about Gdpr, which is the General Data Protection Regulations. For a practitioner, it's really important that you are protecting yourself against breaches of data. Why? Because you are holding really personal information. So you're holding medical records, and that type of data is probably one of the most high risk forms of data. Now, the challenges to practitioners out there are things like cyber hacks. There are things like loss of data. There are things like you're sending out data to the wrong people, or data is stolen. And there's big fines now in place for practitioners that are breaching the regulations. So we would recommend that you look at a dedicated cyber insurance policy, which will cover you for all of your data issues, but it will also cover you for things like hacks or general loss of data or reputational loss of issues. So it's those sort of things that I think medical practitioners are starting to become more aware of, but it is probably the second, if pushing on the most important insurance that actually a medical practitioner should be thinking about. We offer a dedicated cyber policy which will cover a plethora of risks to protect you should the worst things happen. They don't generally happen that often, but I'm always of the opinion that if you don't have insurance, you're going to end up with a loss. So always make sure you've got that policy.
Have you seen cases of cyber hacks?
So they are actually becoming much more common.
Okay, and so what would a benefit of the policy be?
So if you had a clinic with 10,000 patients, there's 10,000 patient records on their system. If that information gets lost, if it's leaked out to the internet, every single one of those patients will need to be notified there has been a breach of data. Now, what the policy will do is they'll actually take that responsibility off of you. They will contact all the patients, let them know there has been a breach, and also it will help assist getting that information back onto your records.
And I think it's quite important to note with all of this that for a medical practitioner that has storage of loads of personal photographs, make sure that you're not posting those photographs up into social media. Make sure that if you're posting those or storing those photos on the cloud, that you understand what cloud system you're working, that you've got good data backup. It's all of those type of things, and I think electronic and cyber attacks are going to become more and more commonplace, and they're going to aim their issues at the people that are holding the most sensitive data, because no one really wants medical records up there, and we've seen incidences of practitioners just paying ransom claims to make sure that this information isn't leaked onto the wider internet. And this is what cyber policies are now designed to do, to take over that claim, let you carry on working, and we then manage the whole process from looking after the data, getting it back, and then moving into what we call a crisis containment situation. We might have to defend your reputation online, especially if you are a well-known practitioner. The last thing you want is your name and face spread around the newspapers that all of your patients' data has gone up onto the internet. We'll manage that media attention for you. And for the money they cost now, those sort of policies, I think it's a real worthwhile policy to think about.
Yeah, because there's a lot more than money at stake with this.
You are right, Sammy. It's for people that get the hack, it's not the money, it's their reputation that they're more interested about. Other policies I think we need to very quickly talk about is things if you've got a clinic, then you need to, and where you've bought equipment, or where you own the clinic yourself, you need to be thinking about buildings insurance, equipment insurance. You need to be thinking about what happens if there is a major fire or flood. Can you continue to trade? So you can buy things like income replacement insurance on there. Your liabilities if you employ staff. Your own liabilities, if you're a roaming practitioner and you cause injury or damage to someone else's property or to someone else, you need a public liability policy. So all of these type of policies wrap up into a nice suite of protection for you that you can get on with what you're doing, which is treating people, knowing that if there's any issues, you've got that insurance to cover you behind the scenes. Always make sure you're using a financial conduct authority registered broker. So be very careful when you're buying on the internet, because you don't necessarily know who the provider is. Go to an expert, a specialist that can give you that guidance. And if anything was to go wrong, they've got comeback, or you've got comeback against that insurance broker.
Thanks for that, Eddie. That was interesting. So Emma, Hamilton Fraser operates the Cosmetic Redress Scheme. What is that?
So the Redress Scheme basically deals with service-related complaints. Whereas your medical malpractice policy will protect you if there's any issues following a treatment, the Redress Scheme will actually deal with any complaints regarding the service of your business. So say for instance you had a patient who was making a complaint against you for situations like if their appointments keep getting cancelled, if they've got any issues with the cost of treatments, that they've been charged too much. That is all service-related issues and it wouldn't be covered under your medical malpractice policy. The reason that you should belong to a redress scheme is because they would actually take that issue and they will deal with it on your behalf.
Oh, that's interesting.
So there is a piece of legislation at the moment that all businesses across Europe and in the UK have to tell their customers that they are part of a redress scheme, or signpost them to a scheme that can deal with a complaint if the practitioner refuses to do it. And that's where the Cosmetic Redress Scheme fits in. It's a lovely complement to the medical malpractice, as Emma's just explained. But there are just so many service-related issues going on at the moment which we would deal with on behalf of your customer or your patient. So again, it's very, very easy and cheap to join, and it actually ticks a box from your legislative requirements, but also gives a nice added extra that you can say that if we don't deal with your complaints properly, you can refer it to the Cosmetic Redress Scheme, who will do it and come to a decision for us.
Thanks for that, Eddie. So what would you both say would be the main tips to take away when trying to look for insurance?
Well, from my point of view, it would be, first of all, make sure that you don't just buy the first thing that you find on the internet. Research the market, make sure that you're dealing with an authorised insurance provider. Make sure that you read your policy so that you know what you're buying. None of this is cheap, let's be honest with you. So make sure that it's going to cover what the risks that you are concerned about, and understand what the exclusions are to those policies. And then don't panic about buying everything at the same time. Have a plan of action that as you grow from one step to another, you need to have different types of insurance. So treat your insurance broker the same way you do treat your accountant and your lawyers. You know, ask for advice, get a relationship going, and build up your portfolio as and when you can afford it and when the time is right. Would you say that? That's probably it, isn't it?
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask questions. If you feel that you need to ask more questions to understand, ask your broker. They'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that, Eddie and Emma. Don't be afraid to ask questions. So we'll see you again soon.